The private hangar was alive with the buzz of laughter and clinking glasses. The millionaire, Charles Whitmore, a man known as much for his arrogance as his wealth, leaned lazily against his polished jet. A circle of businessmen surrounded him, all dressed in sharp suits, drinks in hand. They weren't just admiring his plane. They were admiring him. On the edge of the hangar stood a thin, weathered woman in a faded coat, clutching a worn duffel bag. Her hair was tucked under a knit cap, and her shoes had holes at the toes. Most people didn't see her. Most people didn't care to. Her name was Evelyn Carter. For months, she'd been living in shelters and under bridges, often hungry but never hopeless. She'd wander by airfields and watch planes slice the sky, her eyes following every arc, every dive, every burst of acceleration. To her, flight was freedom. Flight was dignity. Flight was everything. Charles noticed her that night, not because he cared, but because he saw an opportunity for mockery. He raised his glass and called out loudly, "You there! Yes, you! What are you staring at, woman? Never seen a plane like this before?" The crowd chuckled. Evelyn didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "I've seen plenty of planes," she said softly. "I used to fly them." The hangar erupted in laughter. Charles smirked, delighted by what he thought was a joke. "You? Fly? My dear, you can barely carry yourself, let alone handle millions of dollars worth of machinery." He slapped the wing of his jet. "Tell you what, I'll give you the plane if you can fly it. Right here, right now," the crowd roared with amusement. Evelyn simply set down her duffel bag and pulled out something no one expected. An old, creased flight logbook. Inside were pages filled with records, stamps, and notations dating back decades. "I don't need your plane," she said, her voice calm. "I just need a chance." The hangar grew quiet. Something about her tone silenced the laughter. Charles, never one to back down from a spectacle, barked orders at his pilot. "Start her up. Let's see this woman embarrass herself." Moments later, the jet hummed with power. Evelyn climbed the stairs slowly, each step an act of defiance. Inside the cockpit, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from memory. She traced her fingers across the controls like a pianist greeting her instrument after years of silence. And then, she came alive. With a flick of switches and a steady push of the throttle, the jet surged forward. The crowd outside gasped as the wheels lifted off the ground. The night sky swallowed the plane. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Carter was free. She rolled, climbed, and banked with the precision of a master. The millionaire's smug grin melted into shock. The businessmen stood with their mouths open. Even the seasoned pilot, watching from the tarmac, shook his head in disbelief. When she landed, Evelyn stepped out of the cockpit with quiet grace. The silence was deafening. Charles tried to laugh it off, but the humiliation was etched across his face. One of the younger businessmen approached Evelyn cautiously. "Ma'am, who are you?" She smiled faintly. "Once upon a time, I was Captain Evelyn Carter, first black woman to serve as a combat pilot in the U.S. Air Force. I trained hundreds of aviators who still fly today. But when the medals stopped, the world forgot me." The revelation hit like thunder. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. Within hours, Evelyn's story spread across social media. "Homeless pilot stuns millionaire, a forgotten legend." News stations picked it up. Former students, colleagues, and even old commanders came forward, sharing memories of the fearless woman who had taught them to soar. Crowdfunding campaigns raised money. A veterans organization offered her housing. A major airline offered her a role as an instructor. As for Charles Whitmore, his name became a footnote in the story, not for his wealth, but for his arrogance. Evelyn Carter, once mocked as a nobody, became a symbol of resilience, brilliance, and dignity. She didn't just reclaim her place in history, she soared above it. And whenever she spoke to young people after that, she always said the same thing. Never let the world tell you what you are. If they dare you to fly, prove that you were born with wings. The private airfield hangar glittered under golden lights. Inside, wealthy businessmen, politicians, and investors clinked glasses of champagne, their laughter echoing across the polished floor. At the center of attention stood Charles Whitmore, a millionaire known not only for his fortune but also for his arrogance. Behind him gleamed his pride, a custom private jet worth millions, a symbol of his power. Near the edge of the hangar stood a thin, weary woman. She wore an old coat, a knit cap pulled low, and carried a battered duffel bag. But her eyes, they were fixed only on the jet. Her name was Evelyn Carter. Charles, basking in the attention of his circle, soon noticed her gaze. Smirking, he raised his glass and mocked loudly so the whole room could hear. "Charles, Well now, have you ever even seen a plane like this before? The crowd laughed. Evelyn didn't flinch. She stepped forward slowly, her voice calm but firm. Evelyn, I've seen many planes. In fact, I used to fly them. The hangar erupted in more laughter. Charles shook his head, amused. Charles, you? Fly this? My dear, you can barely carry yourself, let alone handle a machine worth millions. Evelyn, meeting his eyes. Don't mistake my coat for my worth. The line cut through the laughter. Charles raised an eyebrow, irritation showing. He wanted to humiliate her further. Charles, fine then. I'll give you this plane if you can fly it. Right here. Right now! The guests cheered, their laughter rising again. Evelyn calmly set down her duffel bag, unzipped it, and pulled out a weathered flight logbook. Its pages were filled with notations, stamps, and signatures. Evelyn, here's my proof. Every mission, every mile, every flight I ever commanded. The hangar fell quiet. Some faces shifted from mockery to curiosity. Evelyn climbed the jet's stairs slowly, deliberately. As she stepped into the cockpit, her eyes softened with recognition. Her hands brushed the controls like an artist returning to her instrument. She flipped switches, checked gauges, adjusted throttles, her movements confident, precise. The engines roared to life. Outside, the crowd shielded their eyes from the sudden flood of engine light. Charles forced a smug grin, but unease crept across his face. The jet thundered down the runway. And then, whoosh! It lifted gracefully into the night sky. Evelyn's hands moved with elegance. She rolled the jet, banked it hard, then lifted it into a perfect arc. The stars framed her path as she danced across the heavens. Below, the crowd watched in stunned silence. The jeers were gone. The smirks had vanished. Even Charles's arrogance melted into pale disbelief. Moments later, the jet descended smoothly, touching down with flawless precision. Evelyn emerged from the cockpit with quiet pride. A young businessman stepped forward, awe in his eyes. Young man. Ma'am, who are you? Evelyn held the silence for a heartbeat before speaking. Evelyn. I am Captain Evelyn Carter, the first black woman combat pilot in the United States Air Force. I trained hundreds of aviators who still fly today. But when the medals stopped, the world forgot me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones flashed. Cameras clicked. Within hours, headlines spread like wildfire. Homeless black pilot stuns millionaire. A forgotten legend. Her story went viral. Old photos and military records surfaced. Former students came forward, telling how she trained and inspired them. Crowdfunding campaigns raised money for her. A veterans group gave her housing. A major airline offered her work as an instructor. And then came a moment no one expected. At a public event, in front of a crowd of journalists and citizens, Charles Whitmore himself walked onto the stage. Gone was his smug grin. In its place, shame and humility. He stepped before Evelyn, bowed his head, and spoke. Charles, Captain Carter, I mocked you, I doubted you, I disrespected you. But today I know, I was in the presence of greatness. Please forgive my arrogance. The audience hushed. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes steady, her voice calm. Evelyn, my flight is bigger than your apology, but thank you for finally recognizing the truth. Soon after, the city held a grand ceremony at the largest air base. Thousands gathered. Young cadets in crisp uniforms lined up in salute. Children waved flags. Cameras rolled as Evelyn stepped onto the stage. The roar of applause shook the airfield. She stood tall, now in a fresh uniform, her medals pinned proudly to her chest. The cheers of the crowd washed over her like a long-awaited embrace. Evelyn leaned into the microphone, her voice steady, yet filled with warmth. Evelyn, the world may forget you. They may laugh at you. They may try to push you aside, but never let them take away your wings. If they dare you to fly, show them you were born to touch the sky. The audience rose to its feet, clapping, cheering, many with tears in their eyes. Young girls in the crowd shouted her name, inspired by her resilience. And among the applause stood Charles, clapping louder than anyone, his face no longer smug but filled with genuine respect. A training jet sat on the tarmac, gleaming in the golden light. Evelyn placed her hand gently on its wing, eyes lifted to the sky. She was no longer the forgotten woman in the shadows. She was Captain Evelyn Carter, an aviation legend reborn, a symbol of courage, and a beacon for generations to come. The same millionaire who once mocked her now stood in the front row, applauding her hardest, a humbled man honoring the legend he had tried to belittle. And Evelyn, at last, soared higher than ever before.